Fáilte. Welcome to this episode of The Language Question, Ceis na Tongan, a conversation about the Irish language and its history for anyone curious about their relationship with it and its role in our identity. Our guest in this episode is Indrek Ois. Indrek is an Estonian translator with the European Commission, and he is the translator of Tig MacDonaghan's excellent novel, Madame Lazare, into Estonian as Frau Lazare, the first book to be translated directly from the Irish language into Estonian. As always, I hope you enjoy listening to this conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. I continue to receive amazing feedback from listeners, and I am so grateful to you if you have been one of those kind enough to do so. If you enjoy or get any benefit from any of these conversations, I would be so grateful if you would rate and review the show on Apple or Spotify to help others like you to discover what we're doing here. Please also be sure to sign up at thelanguagequestion.com/resources to get your complimentary, valuable learning resources and to ensure that you stay up to date with upcoming episodes, guests, and to receive exclusive content. Anyhow, here goes with this episode. I hope you enjoy it. Go muine tú soltas. Indrek Ois is an Estonian translator who graduated with an MA in Translation and Editing from the Centre of Irish Language at Maynooth University in 2021. He is now working as a staff translator for the European Commission, and he is the translator of Tig MacDonaghan's multi-award-winning novel Madame Lazare into Estonian as Frau Lazare, the first book to be translated directly from the Irish language into Estonian. Indrek a cara Tá Harabh bué diaad as a bheith ling agus is tá fáilte is fitheróid ar an show.
Hi, Efin. Go míle maithagad as a goire sin agus tásúlagam go mé spéis a géisteoirí sa méid a bheith le rágam. Go míle maithagad.
Well, gan éon doubt a cara. And we are so grateful to you for agreeing to be here and to joining us to discuss your experience of the Irish language and everything associated with that here today. And what I would like to do, Indrek, to start that, as we do with all of our guests here, is really just to talk about your background in the language. And I suppose for me, yours is a particularly interesting one, coming from your Estonian, and you've come to the Irish language from a very different place to many of the types of learners that we will have had on the show previously. So would you mind just telling us, how did you first become aware of the language, and what did that look like for you as you evolved in it?
Yes, well, actually, my background is in English, which is I did my undergrad in English, and that's how I came in contact with Irish, because just by accident, when I was in my first year at university, there was a guy who was giving Irish classes in a sort of informal way, and I was always interested in languages, so that's why I considered taking up Irish in the first place. And I was also in a way predisposed, I would say, because I've been reading things about Irish folklore, Irish history, the fact that Ireland is in a way similar to Estonia historically, because we have the same colonial background, you being part of the British Empire, and the Estonian being governed by Germans and then Russians later on. So in a way, it might have been a strange choice, but I was already, in a way, interested in the country and the culture. And so, yeah, that's how it happened, really. And, well, the start was quite difficult because I had no idea about the language itself. Everything was completely new to me. The whole initial mutations business, I'd never seen anything like that in any language I'd tried to learn before. So, yeah, that wasn't easy, but maybe it's one of the things that sort of keeps you going and keeps you interested as a learner.
Of course, and tell me, was that what you were studying? Was that in Estonia when you were doing your undergraduate degree?
Yeah, that's right. I was still in Estonia when I started that.
And was that an Irish person who was giving the language lessons in Irish?
The funny thing is that actually my teacher was German, but he was such a such talented linguist that he mastered Estonian to the point that I thought, first of all, he was an Estonian. Well, there was something of an accent. So we were joking that he spent too much time in Ireland. Probably he's got a bit of an accent now. But when we actually asked him, he replied that, "Well, I'm not Estonian, guys. I'm German," and he just besides having learned Estonian, he'd already learned Irish as well. So yeah, an incredible person called Alex Jago. So if Alex happens to listen to the podcast, thanks a lot for for this start and the introduction into the beautiful Irish language.
Well, that is simply phenomenal. And can you tell us then how did it evolve from there, Indrek? Did you? I mean, where did your kind of progression with the language go from there?
Yeah, I have to admit there weren't too many students who were taking the Irish classes. The first class was um, full of students, but then eventually people started, stopped coming. So there were maybe just five of us by the end of the first year, and then second year, just me and another guy. So yeah, I was probably the most motivated of all the students, and I tried to also, learn new stuff on the side by myself, and that's how I carried on later on as well, trying to find more resources on the internet. There weren't so many things at the time because it was back in the 90s. So yeah, trying to learn as much as I could by myself as well. I was looking for opportunities to go and study in Ireland, but Estonia wasn't part of the EU at that time, so it wasn't that easy, and I didn't manage to find anything. Um, I was just lucky enough to get an invitation to attend the foreigners course in Cararoo. It's a summer course which runs for a whole month, and I got a letter from the University of Galway that if I was interested, I could attend this course, and there was also a small scholarship available for doing that. So yeah, that was how I got into it, so to say. And after visiting the Connemara Gaeltacht, I was completely in love with the language. It was just such an incredible experience because I'd heard Irish from tapes and stuff like that, but I'd never experienced it as a living language in a sort of normal everyday setting. So seeing Irish in action in the Gaeltacht was something something really special. And
Extraordinary, and that actually just brings up something that I think is has cropped up and occurs to me frequently, is about that whole idea of the opportunity of being able to use the language when you come to Ireland. Let's say having not been here before, and that's something I think that maybe a lot of people are surprised by or struggle with is when they come to Ireland, there are so few opportunities to use the language in it. So you came and you lived in the Connemara Gaeltacht, but did you? And that was a huge transformative experience for you. But did you have any sense of the state of the language outside of the Gaeltacht when you came here that time, or was you were immersed in the language there? Did that ever strike you, the fact that the
yes,
language wasn't spoken more widely?
yeah, I think it's a pretty striking, contrast between the rest of the island, or especially urban areas such as Dublin, that most of the time you don't even hear the language spoken, or you really have to be lucky to come across someone who speaks it. Well, there are people who speak Irish. There are lots of them, even in Dublin. I mean, there are Gascoigne and people who speak Irish at home. But in the streets, yeah, you're right. I think you you don't really meet, or you don't hear the language. Let's put it that way. So yeah, it's a completely different situation as opposed to the Kaltachta, because there you're immersed in the language. It's everywhere. I mean, even students or learners speak Irish to each other, or try to do so at least. So yeah, I remember when I left the Gaeltacht at the end of the course, I was so much into Irish, or I'd sort of my mind had switched to this different wavelength that actually in the street I responded in Irish. I said "Gomalishka" in Dublin, just not trying to be more Gaelic than the Gaels themselves, but just naturally, because I've been living in that kind of environment for a month,
And,
and probably it would happen to everyone who was exposed to the language for a longer period of time.
I wish that it were the case with more Irish people. I think, in fact, that we might slip into that from time to time. But and how then did that? So you had that fantastic experience in Ankarua, and fell in love with the language there. How did it go from there? Then what were you able to go deeper from therein, or how did that work for you?
Well, it's not easy going with the Irish language. I mean, it's not spoken internationally. Let's say it's quite difficult to find opportunities to practice. So you might be learning on your own, reading a bit, doing this and that, but yeah, it takes a long time to get mm, proficient, or it might be even difficult to get proficient, or especially when it comes to speaking the language and understanding spoken Irish, when you're not actually living in Ireland or in the Gaeltacht. So yes, but fortunately, I was able to spend 3 years in Northern Ireland at the beginning of the noughties. Um, and there, of course, there were students, Irish students as well, from Belfast and Donegal, Galdacht. So I had a chance to attend Irish classes with them sometimes, and chat to them in the library, for instance. So that was a way of trying to improve my language skills, and not losing what I'd learned as well.
But it must have required an extraordinary amount of motivation on your part to persist with that. I mean, well, moving here and obviously is one, or moving to the island is one thing, but but as you say, in the face of the scarcity of opportunities to use the language, it really must have. This was something that you were very very committed to and dedicated to. I mean, what was driving you there?
Yes, I don't know. Maybe just it's a sort of madness. I think you fall in love with the language, and you realize that there aren't so many speakers of it in the world. So you think the fact of me speaking it, or trying to speak it in a way, contributes also to the language staying alive. So yeah, I think that's an extra bonus which you wouldn't find with a bigger language. I mean, if you take, for example, Spanish or French, I mean, nobody would care if I spoke Spanish or French or didn't. So, but speaking one more person speaking a small language, I think that's every little helps, as they say.
Ah, well, it's far from a little that you have committed and contributed to what you've done in the language, Indrek. It's phenomenal. And but so then we come forward to the early noughties. You spend 3 years in Northern Ireland, living there, and taking the opportunity then to have some more involvement with the language, and then how was, because I know now you work as a translator. Was that always part of your kind of vision in relation to how you would be involved with the language?
Not really. I mean, as a if you're a linguist and study languages, the options aren't very very wide. Either you end up teaching or you end up translating. So I ended up as a translator, and when Estonia joined the European Union in 2004, I was offered a job in Luxembourg to work as a translator for the Commission. So I've been doing that ever since, and as a hobby, trying to keep my Irish as well. And now that Irish isn't in a full regime, it's just works the same way as all the other official languages of the European Union. All the documents are translated into Irish as well. So there have been some opportunities for me as well to contribute in that field, especially before the Irish department was fully staffed. Um, Now and again, I had an opportunity to translate into Irish some documents as well. Of course, I was revised by Irish translators, but yeah, so I could actually use my language in a working setting as well.
And is that something? Was that just a occasional thing, or is that something that you work in the language on a regular basis?
Mm, yeah, let's say not on a regular basis, but now and then, yes. Whenever I wasn't too busy translating into Estonian,
Hmm.
when my boss was happy with it, and then she let me work into Irish from time to time. When the pressure was lower in our own department, because at the time the Irish were short-staffed, so I think yeah, it was of more help. Let's say.
Sure, sure. And can we talk then, Indrek, just about, because what I'd like to maybe feel like to take it forward from your extraordinary history and dedication in learning the language is to what it looks like in your life now, and let's say outside of the working context as a translator. Are you based? You mentioned Luxembourg. Are you based in Belgium, or in
No,
Brussels?
no, I'm based in Luxembourg.
In Luxembourg, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
And what does it look like there? Because I remember when we've spoken to another person who's worked with the commission here in the past, Sean McIntonig, and he has described the rich kind of Irish language community that's there in Brussels. Is there anything similar in Luxembourg, or is that a part of life there?
Well, there used to be more activity in this field when I arrived. Let's say. Then we had Cumungölach, which would meet once a month, and we would have all sorts of activities. For instance, Tronnagest, stuff like that. We would get together in a pub and then just speak Irish and do stuff together once a month, and that was great. We had guest uh, guest speakers coming from Ireland, such as Nolan Ronald, Alan Titley. So that was always very interesting to listen to people like that. But yeah, recently there's been sort of the, it's died down. I would say, maybe also because the Irish people who are working at the institutions socialize more with their own colleagues. They don't go out anymore to meet other Irish speakers as per se, because they have a chance to speak the language anyway at work all the time. So yes, that's yes, the Irish speaking club isn't that active anymore, and that's also that was one of the reasons why I was started learning from for other opportunities to use the language, and why I enrolled in Maynooth as well to do the translation course, because I was interested in it for two reasons. The first one was to improve my Irish, but the second was to actually to get a formal qualification as a translator, because um, I, w- I had a background as a linguist, but I actually never studied translation as such at university. So it was interesting for me in two ways, yes, and very helpful in improving my written Irish as well.
Extraordinary. And uh, and so then, just to understand that correctly, you did the MA in translation editing in the Irish language, the Centre of Irish Language at Maynooth University in 2021. So that was at a time when you had been working as a translator in the European Union in Luxembourg from 2004. So
Yes,
and then to go and get a qualification in translation, you went and studied remotely in Maynooth from
that's
Luxembourg.
right.
So
Yes, yes.
that's quite
I mean,
something.
I was aware of the course long ago, because I'd met Anton McLaughlin, who was in charge of who sort of started the course. I think back in, at the beginning of the 21st century. So, not sure when exactly, but I knew about the course, and I'd been sort of thinking about doing it, but always dragging my feet about it, and saying to myself, "You're not good enough." But then I suppose just the itch got bad enough for me to try, and that's how it happened. First of all, I did the diploma course, which lasted for 2 years, and then I went on to do the masters, yes, which was a 1 year course.
And were those courses taught primarily through Irish?
Yes, everything was in
Ah,
Irish.
okay,
Well,
okay.
we had to translate from English into Irish, so that was a bit of English as well involved. But otherwise, yes, all the materials were in Irish. So yes, that was great.
And you found that those qualifications then very beneficial for you in your actual professional life, even though you were translating in a completely different
Yes, yes, I
language.
did. Of
Yeah.
course, being a professional translator, might say I knew most of it, let's say, from practice, from doing or from practice. But there are always things which are not, which you don't verbalize for yourself. Some core ideas or principles, which sort of underlying things, which um, which sort of influence the way you work. So yes, it was very interesting to get that kind of theoretical knowledge as well, and also I think the perspective is slightly different depending on the country. So the way translation is taught in Estonia wouldn't be 100% similar to the way it's taught in Ireland. So there was also this cultural aspect which I found interesting. The way what is considered a good translation in Ireland, is it the same as in Estonia? So yes, there were lots of interesting aspects related to this course.
Fantastic. And you mention it in the context of a hobby, but I mean, I think certainly from my perspective, it's moved on far more than a hobby at this stage. And I see, I mean, I'd like just maybe to bring us then maybe to Madame Lazare at this stage. And um, I'd love to explore how, first of all, you discovered that novel. That was because I'm would be far further back in my learning journey than you are, Indrek, in terms of your progression and use of the language. But I mean, when I came upon Madame Lazare when it was first published, I was just I was just so delighted that here was a piece of modern Irish literature written, directly in the Irish language that I, as a learner, could actually read. Now, with extensive use of a dictionary on an ongoing basis, and so on. But it was just, and first of all, it's such a wonderful tale, and we've had Tyg McDonagh on previously to talk about it. Um, but Could you tell us how first of all how you came across the novel, and where things went from there in terms of your subsequent translation of it?
Yeah, well, I'd read about the novel on tourish.ee. There was a review by Marin Yene, I think, and it was full of praise. I always thought I might I would like to read the book because it's about the Connemara, Gaeltacht, Aran Island, which I'd been to as well. Um, but I was not aware of the Estonian connection at all at that point. So I was actually told by Anton McLaughlin that I should read this book, but he didn't say why. So I had to go to a bookshop and get the book and start reading. And actually, the Irish edition of the book doesn't specify where Madame Lazare is from. It just says from Northern Europe. So that didn't really say much to me at all. But I started reading the book and enjoyed it a lot from the start because it's, as you say, it's written in a really simple, engaging way. To, I mean, the writer is not trying to use very difficult words to show he's a good writer. Rather it's the other way around, and trying to tell the story in a sort of conversational way, which I found very appealing. And then I, of course, came to the point where Estonia was mentioned, and that was a big surprise. And I started to read, I read on, and there were references to the European Commission. So I thought, wow, I have so many points in common with this book. I always thought I'd love to translate something from Irish into Estonian, but I'd never thought it would be possible. But then just Taig's book came along, and was a perfect opportunity for me to try to make it work. And unfortunately, when I got in touch with the publisher in Estonia, they were also interested in the book, and yeah, so it's quite an incredible story because of yeah. Um,
It's
as
an
as a as a legal translator, you sort of always think that would it be like to translate a literary work? And would it be different, more,
Well, I
Yeah.
can't think of a better person to translate that book. I mean, because as you say, there's so many touch points there. I mean, because without spoiler alert, in terms of the story is it actually involves translators because they assume that Madame Lazare in the nursing home is actually speaking in Estonian, there's and then it's later discovered, and there's so many linguistic kind of little twists and turns in relation to how the story evolves because of language, and then the Irish language and different aspects of the Irish language and so on. But um, and so tell me just. But that is the first book that has ever been translated from the Irish language directly into Estonian, isn't that correct?
Yes, as far as I know, yes.
That must be some feeling.
Yes, I was I was quite happy with that actually when um, yeah, when this thing actually when the book came out. Yes, it was quite incredible to see the translation actually published, and yeah, the words in
But
print.
I mean, this is a
Not
cross.
not in a personal way, but just the whole the idea of you know a novel written in a small language being translated directly into another small language without passing through an intermediary language such as English. I mean, it's just goes to show that I mean we should take a more interest in not just what's written in London or Paris or New York. I mean, there's such a wealth of literature.
Oh,
about,
from
all over the world.
from Unspedale. I mean, it's phenomenal. I mean, but that is an extraordinary cross pollination between these two languages, as you say, without a kind of an intermediary major language. I think it's just so inspirational to hear, Indrek, and congratulations on doing it. It's an extraordinary achievement, and of course, we're speaking now just around the time, or at least from my quite superficial awareness of it. I think the book has just recently come out in the translated version. And how does that look like now? What is the first of all the market like for literature in Estonia, and how's that all that going?
Well, if you're referring to sales figures, then I don't have
No, 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 no.
any
Just
information at all. But I've just been checking blogs and keeping an eye on the internet to see if there are reviews and stuff like that. And I'm glad to say it's been the book's been mentioned. It's been noticed by readers, and I think people have enjoyed reading it and taken an interest as well. And actually, Tiger McGonagall was just in Estonia a few weeks ago on a literary festival where he presented his novel himself. So that was a great cultural event, in my opinion. Bringing an Irish speaking writer to Estonia and presenting his work in Estonian. That was really
and,
special.
of course, indeed it was, and I hope I'm not mistaken in that. I think I saw a photograph of you and Tig and the Estonian ambassador recently
Yes, that's
at an
right.
event.
The Irish Embassy in Estonia, in Tallinn, has been very active in supporting the publication as well, and they've sort of put around the word whenever possible. So yeah, I'm very thankful for that as well.
It's wonderful to see, and
And I mean, there are so many in Estonia, there are so many books that get translated every year. I mean, we're talking about thousands of books, so it's not that easy to make it to the newspapers or get your book reviewed. So the fact that it's been written about is quite an achievement in itself, I think.
undoubtedly. And but could you give us a sense, Indrek, because I imagine for many of our listeners, they may not be terribly familiar with Estonian and Estonia, and I would like to just maybe just talk about that your country and language that you come from in terms of what that looks like, because here in this podcast we talk about the Irish language and a lot about the crisis that the Irish language is facing, um, particularly the community language here in the Gaeltacht. But could you talk just about what Estonian, what first of all, how do you speak? What is it the Estonian language look like right now, and how many
Yeah.
speakers of that are there? Would you have be able to give us some rough outline of that?
Well, it's a pretty small language, as I said already. It's got only about a million speakers. There are 1.3 million people living in Estonia, and currently there's also substantial Russian-speaking minority. So yeah, the number of Estonian speakers around the world would be about 1 million. And yes, I think it's quite a feat that we actually managed to that language has managed to survive through the centuries because we were colonized for hundreds of years. Um, and I suppose we were just lucky that we managed to hang on to the language, and that it wasn't, suppressed in a terminal way, or that people didn't abandon it for some reason. Some people did, of course, but not in a massive way, because until the beginning of the 19th century, Estonians were just serfs. They were, peasants working for the German landlords. So there was no possible way for them to make, to climb the social ladder by adopting the German language, for instance. They just had to, you know, stay where they were in their villages. So in a way, I think it helped to preserve the language, and because the people of the country kept on speaking Estonian, and then when there was this whole movement of national awakening in the 19th century, and all these new nations sort of realized they were different nations, and new states um, were established in Eastern Europe. And so that's what happened to Estonia as well. Estonia became independent after the First World War, because just Europe was in such a big turmoil, and the old empires weren't powerful enough to keep the small nations in check anymore. So that's how we became independent. And unfortunately, we had managed to keep our language until that point, and that's really where Estonian started to be used in all walks of life, also as a medium for teaching in universities. It was used in public institutions. So the language developed and was enriched over a few decades, and that's how it managed to sort of survive and adapt itself to the modern times, and that's why we're still speaking the language in Estonia.
And what would you mind just giving us a picture of what the other competing languages, if you like, the other major languages in that part of the world? How do they interact with Estonian? I mean, do you have is it, like what are the other major languages that are being spoken in your part of the world?
Yeah, I mean, in small countries, you always have a big neighbor, or you're sort of aware of other nations, other neighbors living next to you and speaking different language. And obviously, you couldn't get by abroad just by speaking your own small language. So, from a very early age, you realize that you have to learn foreign languages to, you know, to get on in life in a way. So yeah, historically, German used to be very important because the landlords were German speaking, and then of course Russian, which came with the Russian Empire at the beginning of the 18th century. Mm, well, later on, also English, starting from the 20th century, English became more important. Especially after the Second World War, I think it sort of replaced German as our first foreign language. And then you have Finnish, which would be quite important as well, just across the Gulf of Finland from Estonia. For instance, when I was a kid, we could watch we could watch Finnish TV, and that was sort of still during the Soviet times, but they couldn't you know keep us from doing that. It was just the signal was there, and if you were close enough to Helsinki, you could watch the program. So yes, basically all the all the children of my age learned passive Finnish just by watching Finnish TV, and then you would have also maybe Latvian in the south of the country. So yeah, many different languages, and yeah. Of course,
And
German has influenced Estonia the most, probably during the history. Also, the grammar and syntax and vocabulary.
and did you ever have anything in Estonia similar to this thing we have in Ireland now, or have had for some time, where there was the compulsory learning of Irish, which some a lot of people resented, and it resulted in a lot of negative backlash towards the language. Did you ever have anything like that in Estonia?
Yes, actually, it's curious you should mention it. When I think about myself, I would say that uh, that's exactly how I learned Russian at the time, because it was a compulsory subject at school. We had to study it, but there was a sort of resentment against learning the language because of the Soviet occupation. So that's why, yes, that's why I didn't really like the subject at school, and that's why my Russian isn't very good either. Unfortunately, it was only later that I understood that I should have made an effort, because it's you the you have to keep sort of what is political and what is cultural apart. There's nothing wrong with Russian language or Russian culture, Russian literature. It's there are wonderful things written in Russian, and so yeah, being able to enjoy that is a great advantage. So yeah, in a way, I realized that it's quite similar to the Irish case, and yeah, just resenting the language because it was sort of rammed down your throat, and not not taught the right way and not for the right reasons. And yeah,
And you have parallels there that I think we can certainly relate to here, even though perhaps maybe if you like
I think it's most of all the fact that it was compulsory, and you know um, people didn't really like doing it for political reasons.
Mhm, mhm.
So yeah, I think it's a question of mindset. I think
Oh, completely, and except of course that the flip side would have been the case here, and that the language that we were being forced to learn was our native language, and
yes,
and and,
yes,
and so
that's
it's
in
extraordinary,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
That's in even a more complicated scenario,
yeah,
actually.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
but if it's not properly explained why a person should learn the language, then yeah, that's what can happen. Yeah, I can completely understand why people don't like it, because the, they teach it at school, but then you don't have anywhere to practice it or use it. It's just if it's just for for appearance's sake. I mean,
Or if it's an abstract academic kind of
yeah,
idea, yeah, completely. I mean, I think the issue of opportunity to use the language outside of the classroom environment is a huge thing. Also, I've just been reading a fascinating book, Compulsory Irish, by Mr. Kelly, published back in the 80s or early 90s, I think. But some of the things there just are eye opening in terms of how compulsory Irish was enforced at the
yeah,
beginning of the Irish state. And I think that a lot of what comes out of that is a lot of this forced down our throat. It was the way that it was taught. Those kind of tropes come from, I think, the early days of the Irish state, particularly. But then the other thing that strikes me here is you had this extraordinary phenomenon where you had violence or compulsion in the education system for the first half of the second half of the 19th century, where children were being, there was corporal punishment to kind of, if you like, beat English into them.
yeah,
And then when we had the foundation of the Irish state, there was corporal punishment to beat Irish into them. And I think that has left a lot of scars on many levels. But it's very, very interesting how that resonates with your experience of how Russian was taught when you were learning that
yeah.
in
No, I'm
Estonia.
not saying Irish shouldn't be a compulsory subject. It's just that
Yeah.
that that there should be a context for using the language as well. It's
Yes.
if we go to the trouble of teaching it at school, I mean, we might as well create opportunities for learning for using it in real life.
I think that's absolutely essential, and you put your finger on something that's absolutely critical. I think, Indrek, and
And
and I
it
just
isn't so it isn't just a symbol. I mean, it's a real language. As I've experienced myself, it's a language that you can use for all sorts of different things. And
And that just beautifully comes to the next thing that I was hoping to just get your views on really is, and I'd love your views on somebody from outside who has, devoted a huge amount of your life to learning this other minority language, and I love the way in which you felt this sense of connection because of maybe a shared or similar history and past. But what is your sense now of Irish, and particularly now, as you mentioned, the lack of opportunity to use the language outside of the education system and those issues that are challenges that are widely recognised. But what is your sense of it now, looking at it from outside, as somebody who's engaging in um, Irish language media? You mentioned tourist.ie, and you're actively reading and listening to Irish language media, which an awful lot of Irish people aren't. What's your sense of the state of the language now, and what do you what's your read on it from outside?
well, it's difficult to gauge the situation really, but I suppose you've seen the latest census figures as well for Irish speakers, which sort of point in the direction that it's decreasing, and doing badly in the Gaeltacht, and bit better in outside. So yes, I mean it's difficult to difficult to find a way out of this situation, I think. But and yeah, I mean it can be discouraging or look discouraging that just to see that so few people actually use and speak the language daily. But on the other hand, I think a lot of it depends on your own personal motivation. For example, yourself going back to to university to study the language, actually, and now considering doing a master's degree. So, I mean, these avenues are open to everyone. Or if not that, there are different ways of finding use for the Irish language, or sort of making it, making sense of it, or yeah, practicing it in a way that sort of relates to your own hobbies, or you know cultural preferences or whatever. I mean, if Irish Irish music, for example, it's so tightly connected with the language. So there are lots of good reasons for anyone really going back to their Irish and brushing it up, because I think lots of Irish people are just too modest about their own Irish skills, actually, and they always try to put themselves down. But I would say that there are lots of people in Ireland who have pretty good Irish, or pretty a solid base that you could use for taking it further. I mean, because in a way, I'm jealous that I only started learning when I was Irish when I was 18. I mean, you've you've had the opportunity to do it from primary school, or even earlier. So
Yeah, and I think a lot of Irish people kind of talk themselves out of what Irish they may
yes,
know, and keep saying, "Oh, I've learned it for 14 years, but I can't speak a word of it," and it's
yes,
almost
and
they're
or
determined not to.
trying to be perfectionist, and saying that, oh, I'm not going to use the language before I'm perfect, before I make no mistakes. It's all. I mean, come on, it's that's not not the way, not the way it works.
Oh, and that is, but that you have put your finger on it there, Indrek. I have been so guilty of that myself, and so kind of reluctant and hesitant about doing because I'm not good enough. But to hear that as a learner coming from outside, it's inspirational for any of us here trying to learn our own language. That it's just we've got to get over ourselves and get on and use it. Is that it?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, whenever I've tried to learn a new language, I've sort of tried to work out why I'm learning it, and I've tried to find places where I can use it. For example, when I was starting to learn German, I would speak it to my neighbor's kids, or attend training courses in German, just to be able to use the language in a real life setting. Because if you just learn it from the book, you won't be able to speak it. You need to get out there and communicate. So I think that's very helpful if you can sort of tie it together with something you like to do. For example, doing sports through the medium of Irish or whatever. Really.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. That's fascinating. Indrek, what I'd also like to just touch on is the whole question of, because I mean, you're somebody now who's involved working in the European institutions, have been there now since Estonia joined in 2004, and that's been, um, the center of your career and experience. And I mean, I was just speaking with a colleague of yours in relation to who's now part of the Irish language translating community there, and we were discussing this, and this that episode went out just as we were recording this one, or just before, and some of the one interesting bit of feedback that came back in relation to that was kind of going, oh, here's, we have all of these, translators now translating bureaucraties that's never going to be read, from one language into Irish, and it's a brain drain of our best Irish language writers and linguists, and when what they should be doing is translating literature that isn't in Irish into Irish, or translating Irish works written in English in Ireland into Irish. And I was kind of taken a just very, I was interested in the comment. I mean, because you get this a lot about oh, it's such a waste of money translating all of this stuff, but it seems to me, looking at it, and particularly looking at what you've done now with the translation of Madame Lazare, coming out of your, if you like, being involved in that wider just melting pot of European languages, and I suppose the whole European Union project is about supporting the minority languages of the union. But what's your take on all of that? I mean, how beneficial or otherwise do you see the European project in relation to languages and minority languages, and Irish and Estonian?
Well, yeah, I think it can be a sort of double-edged sword because in a way, being together in the union means that we should be able to communicate between ourselves. So we need a sort of common language as well, which is nowadays English, I think. But on the other hand, as you said, the EU supports multilingualism, and that's it's one of its founding principles that all official documents should be available in all the languages of the member states. So yeah, I think I think in a way, translating for the European Union is always it's also beneficial to the language in a wider sense because it's you get lots of new terminology. The language develops at the same speed as other major languages, maybe. So you're sort of forced to keep up with English, French, or Spanish, or German. Even in Estonian or Irish, you have to find the same terms. So I think that helps to sort of guarantee the longevity also of the language and sort of take it on to the next generation that we are not only able to talk about I don't know, fishing or farming or I don't know, folk costumes or stuff like that. We can also talk about the internet, everything, all the technology we have all the necessary terms for that. So I think in that sense, the European project is very beneficial to smaller languages because it sort of puts pressure on them to, to update themselves for the requirements of the modern world, and they don't get left behind.
No, that is so true. That is so true and critical because, as you say, we can have a language that has that a lot of its cultural references are historical and maybe from a certain point in time, and unless we're kind of bringing it forward with changes in society and technology and everything, then the language, if you like, is not evolving. No, that's so wonderful insight, Indrek. Thank you, Indrek. As we come to the end of the conversation, what I would like to do, and I ask each of our guests here, and I'd love to get yours because I'm just so taken with your passion and dedication in learning the language, and now being having produced a wonderful work of literature in your language from the Irish language. Would you mind sharing with us what your Irish language why is? Why did you take up this language? And more importantly, though, why have you stuck with it for this length of time to this level of proficiency and mastery? What is it that has driven you to do that, Indrek?
Well, I suppose there has to be something special in the Irish language then, I suppose, yeah. I don't know. It's a difficult question to answer. Maybe the fact that yeah, it's not that widely spoken. It's slightly different from other Indo-European languages, which makes it more exotic in a way. But also the fact that there aren't too many speakers in the world, so yeah, I suppose it makes it more personal for the learner as well. Yeah, it sort of grows on you, I think. If you manage to make it past the first obstacles on the course, yeah, I think it's definitely worth the effort. And having studied it now for almost 30 years, I still feel I'm not there, and I probably won't get there, or won't be as fluent as I'd like to ever. But still, yeah, I can enjoy the language. I can listen to Irish songs, read books in Irish. So yeah, the whole culture is open to me in a way. So that's hugely interesting, and I think it's just incredible how much you can gain by learning such a small language, which many people even wouldn't know about, maybe.
Well,
And
Indrek,
you should be very proud of it. I mean, it's a language which has got so long traditions. I mean, if we look at written languages in Europe, it's the third oldest language which has written records. So I mean, there are so many good reasons to learn Irish.
well, thank you, Indrek, for sharing that with us because, frankly, it is inspirational, and I think particularly for Irish people who are coming back to try and learn the language, people who are from Ireland or of Irish descent. I mean, to hear somebody coming from a completely different culture and perspective in relation to the language, what you've had to share with us here now has just been, as I say, and I'm at risk of repeating too often, but is frankly inspirational. Indrek a cara gur míle maithagat bhain mé an-taitne bheas an scéal a raibh túling beir bua agus beannacht a cara.
Go milliam hagateen ahin.
Thanks for listening. Gur raibh míle maithagat as a bheith éisteacht. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I would really appreciate your feedback and would be eternally grateful if you would follow, rate, and review the show. Please also be sure to sign up at thelanguagequestion.com/resources to get your free valuable learning resources and to stay up to date with upcoming episodes, guests, and to receive exclusive content. Slán tamil.